Hello, this is Daryl Whiteley with Why Lean Six Sigma. Over the past couple of weeks, we've been looking at the project charter. And we do this because, as American industrialists of the past century said, that a problem well defined is a problem half solved. And so what we're looking at is defining that problem into a part or into an issue that we can solve fairly quickly with the project. Again, we convert a business issue, something that we typically find on a budget sheet, P&L, some kind of financial statement that's causing us issues. We convert that into a process problem, something in the process that's causing the business issue. And then ultimately, with the rest of DMAIC, we convert that process problem into a process solution. And then we convert that process solution into back into a business solution. So we're ultimately trying to make money for the company that we're working for. And again, the last couple, we've been talking about the goal, business case, and opportunity statement. And those three are really related. The business case drives the opportunity, which drives the goal. We can start with an opportunity statement and go the other way. Identify the business case, and then how much of the opportunity do we need to solve to get the business case. Those are important. But there's three other parts that we want to look at. The first one is scope, where we decide how much of the problem we're going to bite off, what areas are we going to address, are we going to include certain people or not other people, are we going to include, if we have solutions, can we use capital? Oftentimes we'll see projects where the capital is either within scope or without scope. IT is either in scope or out of scope, and that sets the boundary of what our solutions will be ultimately. But what we want to do with the scope is decide what's in and what's out. Now, next week we're going to talk about a tool called the SIPOC map, which will help us define this a little bit further. But for the time being, at the beginning of the process, in the define phase, when we're writing the charter, we essentially want to say in the scoping statement, what are the boundaries? Where does the process start that we're going to investigate, and where does it end? That's what we want. And there are some considerations. We want it to be small enough so that we can get this project done fairly quickly. And if it's a black belt project, that means a bigger project. Then we want 4 to 6 months. If it's a green belt or a smaller project, we may have an idea of the root cause, 3 months. And if it's something that we've got a lot of repetitive data and a Kaizen event, then we want the scope to be 3 weeks. But we also have to have it big enough to address the problem. So we might want to consider splitting a project. If we have a big business case that we want to get, there may be multiple Y's, outputs that we need to fix. Consider splitting that into a smaller group of projects. But again, ultimately, the process owner decides on how big it is. And at this point in the project, this should be the process owner saying what's involved in the project. The next thing we want to do is the plan part. Now again, this should be as simple as writing down in DMAIC how long do we think this is going to be. How long is the define phase? How long is the measure phase? We want to have some idea of how long that's going to take. These are not etched in stone. Project charter is really not done until the project's done. It's a contract. And so with new data, we change things. But we want to spend some time nailing down define. 2 weeks, if it's a short project, maybe would be enough. You can do this in a series of 3 or 4 meetings. Then measure, get the data, then analyze the data to establish and validate the root causes, then solve it, pilot the solutions that you come up with, and then how long is it going to take to do the control phase, which is essentially planning and writing the documentation you need to finish. It should be that simple at this point. Now there may be some things where you want report outs. Again, we're going to talk about tollgate reviews. Those should be the report outs. But some, you may, if you're the process owner, you may want some other dates. That's fine. There's nothing etched in stone about using DMAIC in the timing. And in the team, we want to know who owns the process. That's you if you're the sponsor at this point, or the process owner. And I use those synonymously. The sponsor of the project ought to have jurisdiction over the process owner. Who's going to support the project? What are the key stakeholders, or who are the key stakeholders, and what's their involvement in it? who's impacted by the changes of it. We ought to put that kind of stuff down. An example would be, project sponsors, a service center 2 operations manager, project leaders, whoever's going to lead the project. Now, at this point, you're probably working with Billy Black Belt, so you list that down. You may not be, but you oftentimes at this point you're working. If you're the sponsor or the owner, you're working with Billy Black Belt to put this down. You may not know all the process team members. You may just know which groups they're from. But if you have project team members, write them down, and then you write down your key stakeholders. And again, a good project charter should be short. It should not be pages long. Here's an example of a fairly decent one. We've actually got 2 big Y's in this one. I would typically work that down to 1. I think it's market share. The opportunity statement, again, notice we actually write down the transfer functions, or in this particular case, they wrote down the transfer function for the opportunity statement. Then the goal statement goes straight back to the opportunity statement. Shift into reporting, lead time we'd like to get 90% of that down. The scope of it is the process is the service center to end of shift reporting. The planning department and key external customers are going to be involved in collecting the VOC, and it's only going to be concerned with the process from when the end of shift reporting begins until the report is emailed to the planning department. We're not considering what goes into the report at this point. The scope needs to be from when the end of shift begins, right? What data needs to go in there? The inputs may need to be shifted. We may need to expand the scope. And I say we, the team decided that this was the best place to start the scope. And then here's the plan. They thought 3 weeks on define, again, because of the scope. When I remember back, if I can recall back, they didn't know if the scope was right. There was some feeling that the process was the actual reporting, and they had the information. They just couldn't get the end of shift reporting on time. Had a lot of other things to do, so they did not want to expand the scope, but they wanted to validate that. So that's why they were going to take a little bit longer to define. Then they were going to measure, and they thought that would be 3 weeks. They thought that the root cause would become apparent after measuring. So only 1 week in analyze, 2 weeks on the improved part, and then 2 weeks for the training and getting things in needed. So they thought it would take about 11 weeks to get this project done. As it was, I think that was a little short. I think they spent even a little bit more time in analyzing the issue. But we'll recall this project as we go through this series of YouTube videos. And then there's the team. And again, it's fairly simple. I think anybody can look at this charter and know what's going to be worked on. And as we said, as Kettering said, that the first half of last century, a problem well defined is a problem half solved. That's what Lean Six Sigma is about, and that's what define is about. Let's get the problem half solved. Next week, we're going to look at a SIPOC. I hope to make it a little bit more interesting than what we've been doing. We're going to have a process. I'm going to actually show a process, and then we're going to write a SIPOC for that. So if you like this video, please hit the like button, consider subscribing, and we will see you next week.